Hi, my name is Vincent Reese and I'm happy to be with you here today, and I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of Ukraine. Ukraine is, to many people's surprise, the largest country in Europe, and it has so much to offer. It is quite diverse, and we're going to take you around and show you a few of the highlights. We're going to start here in the capital city of Kyiv, the city of K, named after a legendary brother and his family that founded the city, and it's named after him, Kyiv, the city of K. And it was founded probably in the 7th century, and there's a lot of history that's unknown and a lot of it is lost in legend, but what we do know is that Kyiv soon became a very important trading center and a large city in Europe at its peak in probably the 12th century. So here we are in the Maidan, which is the main Independence Square. It's the major meeting point of all people in Kyiv. If you ever want to meet, we meet on the Maidan. That's even where people meet for the revolutions. And so many historical things have taken place right here. And Maidan is on the street called Khreshchatyk. Khreshchatyk is the beautiful, wide, long street by which you can go and explore, go shopping, you can go for ice cream, there's always live music. On Sundays, they often close off the street to make it a pedestrian-only street, and it's family-friendly. And if you come here on Independence Day, not only are there performances and entertainment, but there's very often a very good parade that you get to watch and enjoy. A long time ago, if you had arrived in Kyiv, perhaps say in the 11th or 12th centuries, you would have had to enter the city through one of its gates. And one of the gates that's become the most famous is the Golden Gates of Kyiv. Now, it was called the Golden Gate because it probably had a church on the top which was covered with a golden dome. And that's how it became known as the Golden Gates of Kyiv. And it was destroyed several times, and eventually it was renovated and restored in the new period of Ukraine, the independence period after 1991. And they don't know exactly what it looked like, but a lot of records point to the fact that it could have looked something like it does here in the pictures. So inside there's a museum, and you can really get a chance to see and experience what medieval life in Ukraine would have been like at the time that this gate existed. Not far from here is one of Ukraine's most famous churches, St. Sophia's. And St. Sophia's is now a museum, but it has become the iconic image of Ukraine with its golden domes and exposed old bricks. It was built as a replica to Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, and it has stood there since then and been just a pilgrimage site for people for centuries upon centuries. Now you get a chance to go and wander around the grounds of St. Sophia, but you can also get a chance to go inside. And when you're inside, you get this awing, most incredible sense of history and all the things that have taken place in this land. And you understand how important a center Kyiv was all those years ago. Another church that's very interesting in Kyiv is St. Andrew's. As you can see here, it sits on top of St. Andrew's Hill, and it is the street that runs down beside it is called St. Andrew's Descent, or Andrievsky Uzviz. And this is an artisan street, and along both sides of the road you can see artisans and craftsmen and different kinds of people selling their art. You can buy souvenirs, you can buy antiques and collectibles, and all the way down it winds down towards the Dnipro River and the old part of the city that sits down and below. Now, of course, you can't go to Kyiv without trying its most famous dish, which is, of course, chicken Kyiv. There's even a restaurant called Chicken Kyiv, and if you're going to have chicken Kyiv anywhere in the world, it's got to be here. It's delicious, and it's sort of a bucket list checkmark item for you to do. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more like street food, I highly recommend the Kyivska Perepechka, which is like a hot dog deep fried in batter and it's ready in seconds, and it's tasty and delicious and greasy, and you're gonna love it. Now, of course, if you come on a cobblestone freeway tour, there's nothing more special and more important to us than making sure you have a really up close and personal experience with the local artists and artisans, singers, dancers, and performers. And one of the most famous and most popular groups that people like to see when they go to Kyiv is Rózhanectsia. Rózhanectsia is a group that's very special to me, and we invite them not only just to perform for our guests, but often we invite them to join us for dinner. Well, they'll sit around the table with us and we'll sing, and they'll sing for us, and we'll have a really wonderful evening where they will not just sing for us, but also share some traditions and stories and rituals, and sometimes they'll get us up dancing, and it's a wonderful time. And here's a little bit of a sample of what Rózhanectsia is like, so you can know for your next trip. All right, now we're going to take you down to Poltava. Poltava, you can see on the map here, is located right in the heart of Ukraine, in central Ukraine. I mentioned before that Ukraine is the biggest country in Europe, and right in the middle, just off from the Dnipro River, is the city of Poltava. And it's famous for many things, but it's relatively unknown in the West in terms of a tourist destination. So we want to show you a few things that make it really special. One unfortunate historical part of what makes Poltava famous is the Battle of Poltava, which, ultimately ended the Cossacks' strive for independence for Ukraine, and led to the many centuries of the Russian Empire controlling most of Ukraine. But the Battle of Poltava was historically a very important battle for Europe in general. It was one of the largest battles ever fought on European soil, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and it was a very tragic battle. However, the museum there now, towards the Battle of Poltava, is a fascinating collection and a tribute to that era, which happened many centuries ago. So I really encourage you to come to Poltava in central Ukraine and see the old city center, and see the battlefield, and see the museum. But the old city center has got wide streets and cafes and lots of trees. And Poltava, you may not know, is right in the heart of where Ukrainian language came from. So literary Ukraine really originated in this part of Ukraine. And many famous writers came from this area. Kostyubinsky, Hohol, Shevchenko was from Cherkasy, but it's not far away. So this part of Ukraine is really rich in its Ukrainian language tradition. And you can go visit Kostyubinsky's house, and you can visit Hohol's house, and you can see some of the places that inspired them to write their works. So I think Poltava is a city that doesn't get enough attention and really should be more popular on people's destination lists. It's not that far from Kyiv to drive, and you can really enjoy a beautiful scenic drive, and along the way stop in different places and then spend a few days enjoying Poltava. When you're in Poltava, you have to try the halushke. Halushke are like a steamed dumpling that are so delicious, and they're so famous in this part of the world. They call them Poltavsky halushke. There's songs written about them, there's poems written about them. They even have a halushke festival, which you can come and you can try different kinds of halushke. It's like vareniki, or what people call pirohe or pierogis, but they're steamed and they're a little bit different, and it's its own interpretation, and you have to absolutely come and experience it. So please consider Poltava for your next destination. And it's also not just the literature of Ukraine that's famous in Poltava. It's the look of Ukrainian costumes that are famous all around the world. The baggy pants, the jupan, the red boots that everyone thinks of the typical Ukrainian look came also from Poltava. All right, now we're going to move a little bit farther south into central Ukraine along the river Dnipro to the city of Zaporizhia. Zaporizhia is famously named after the Cossacks that lived in that area. The Cossacks that we spoke about earlier that lived up north in Poltava and fought the Battle of Poltava. Now here's the homeland of the Zaporizhian Cossacks, which were sort of rebel warriors of the wild steppe lands of Ukraine, and they settled beyond the rapids on an island called Khortytsia. And that island is still there in the middle of the Dnieper River now today, and they have a museum, which is a bit of a fortress called the Sich, and this is where the Cossacks used to live. And it was a fortified secret location on an island, and they lived there, and from there they carried out their military campaigns, and sort of in a way they protected Ukraine from invaders coming from the east and the south. And nowadays you can go to this island and see almost like a reenactment of what life was like there. So they have an open architecture museum, and you can explore the life of a Cossack who might have lived there in the 16th or 17th century. And they have a group of Cossacks now that basically live there and do reenactments of battle and training. So they live there, they train with swords and spears and rifles and horses, and they're so entertaining. We're going to show you a little bit about that. Oh, I almost forgot to mention the dub. Dub means oak tree in Ukrainian, and one of the most famous oak trees in all of Ukraine is right here in Zaporizhia, and it's because around this oak tree, the Zaporizhian Cossacks, along with Bogdan Khmelnytsky, one of the famous generals or hetman, they gathered around this famous dub many years ago, and the city's making an effort to make sure that the dub doesn't fall down and it stays alive, and so they're propping it up a little bit, but historically it's still a very famous place to visit. And of course, as you all know, Ukrainians famously enjoy vodka. Well, one of the vodkas that's very popular comes from central Ukraine, Khortytsia, and there's another very good vodka, Zirkova, which comes from just a bit farther north, Cherkasy. But when you're in Ukraine, you're going to want to try the vodka, and you're going to want to practice learning how to drink it. So vodka is probably not mixed with Coke and cola and everything like that. It's drunk straight, and it's supposed to be enjoyed. So there's a special breathing technique that you're going to have to master when you come to Ukraine. And if you come with Cobblestone Freeway Tours, we'll teach you how to do it. Odessa, Odessa Mama, like they call it. They say Odessa is the mother of Ukraine, and it really has a warm, inviting spirit right on the Black Sea coast, and very almost Mediterranean subtropical atmosphere, quite humid, and lots of grapes growing. We're going to talk about the wine there in a minute, but if you want to diversify your trip to Ukraine with some beach time and some wine tours, Odessa's the area for you to go visit. So Odessa was originally founded by Catherine II of Russia, and so it's got a very multicultural atmosphere to it. It was a port city, so of course all port cities have a real unique atmosphere, but Odessa not only has its own unique atmosphere, it has its own unique sense of humor, which is hard to understand, and it's a mixture of Ukrainian and Russian and Jewish peoples that have lived there for so long. And then prior to them, of course, you had Greek settlements on that territory, and you even had Tatar settlements on that territory. So when you go to explore Odessa, you're really going to have a varied experience. All right, if you're walking around Odessa, one of its most iconic sites is, of course, the Potyomkin Steps. And this architectural phenomenon is interesting because if you look at it from one way, it doesn't look like it's a lot of steps. It's sectioned off. But when you look at it from the bottom up, it's an optical illusion, and it looks like there's no breaks. It's just one big, simple, smooth way. And actually, it's funny, in winter, every so often they'll get a dump of snow, and you'll have snowboarders and skiers coming down those steps. Anyway, they lead you off into the port, And you can go and explore the port, and there's lots of beautiful monuments and areas to visit around there. Get yourself an ice cream cone, learn about the history of Odessa, and maybe you could even do a little cruise around the harbor. So that's something you can always do in Odessa. Back up at the top, you're going to be able to go to the most famous Odessa Opera Theater. And it's just a beautiful piece of architecture on the outside and in the inside. If you're lucky to go when it's open and catch a show and experience like the awe of being in one of these most famous European opera theaters, you'll be in for a real treat. Of course, when you're walking around Odessa, you want to try the food too. It's a seafood port, so you're going to try lots of different kinds of seafood that's unique to that part of Ukraine. So as we travel around Ukraine, you'll have different cuisines. But in Odessa, you're going to definitely get into seafood. But one special unique treat that you're going to want to try is called the gogol-mogol, which is a special warm egg drink that can sometimes be used with a bit of rum inside it. So something you'll definitely have to try when you're in Odessa is the gogol-mogol. As I mentioned earlier, the wine area of Odessa is absolutely something that you want to enjoy. And we often like to take our guests on a little bit of a day trip up to the Chabot winery area. And you're going to be able to do a tour of the winery, see how it's made, and plus visit the museum. It's a fascinating story and history. It was actually German Swiss people that created this winery way back in the day. And then in the 50s, all the Germans left. They were forced to leave, and the winery went into disarray. After independence, the winery was bought again, and it's been redeveloped, and it has become a world-class winery and a world-class museum. So definitely something you'll really enjoy on one of our trips. So when you're on a cobblestone freeway tour, we're going to make sure that you stay in a centrally located hotel with some character. And the reason we do that is we think that perhaps maybe you're only going to come to this place once in your lifetime. And if that's the case, you don't want to be staying out at some airport hotel far away from the center. You want to soak up the atmosphere and the vibe of the place that you're visiting. So we always choose a place in the center that is safe, that has good Wi-Fi, that has cold beer, that has good security, so that you can also get out for a walk and walk around the center. Maybe you're an early riser, maybe you're a night owl, and you want to go out and explore on your own a little bit. So you'll have a bit of free time, and you'll be in a centrally located hotel so you can enjoy the city that you're visiting. Now we are in the ethnographic region of Bukovina. And Bukovina is very famous for a lot of people here because so many Ukrainians that left Ukraine or started leaving Ukraine over 130 years ago came from this part of the world. And Chernivtsi is the capital city of Bukovina, and it is a very unique little corner of the world, right on the border with Romania. Bukovina, in fact, goes partly into Romania. So there's Ukrainian villages in Romania and Romanian villages in Ukraine, depending on where the border was drawn. And it has a unique flavor of architecture and the people and the food and everything. So you're really going to have a unique experience. In fact, when you travel all around Ukraine, it's like so many different countries all in one because it's so big and so diverse. So one of the things you're really going to like about Bukovina, and it's most famous, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, is the university. So the university grounds are stunning to walk around. Some people joke about it and call it the Hogwarts of Ukraine, but it's because it's got that sort of magical, mystical, university type atmosphere. And it is a famous university for its languages. And Chernivtsi is also the sister city of Saskatoon. So there's a lot of exchange programs between Canadian and Ukrainian groups that go through this university. So you're going to really enjoy the tour of the university, the halls, the architecture, the buildings, it's fascinating. And then from there, right in the heart of Chernivtsi, you're going to be able to have the chance to walk up and down the beautiful street called Kobolyanska Street. This street is named after Olha Kobolyanska, and it is a pedestrian area, all cobblestoned and beautiful. We like cobblestones here. But there's microbreweries along this street. There's different kinds of restaurants and cafes and art galleries. And you can really have a nice, beautiful stroll and people watch and just soak up the atmosphere going up and down this street. And it is unlike any pedestrian street that I've ever experienced. It's charming and magical, and with the light throughout the day, it's always changing. So you're going to really enjoy it there. And one of the special food experiences that you're going to get when you're in Chernivtsi is going to a restaurant that we really like, and we're going to feature here right now for you. It's called Hopachok. Hopak is the famous dance of Ukraine, but Hopachok is a little example of that. And in this restaurant, they've selected all kinds of special Bukovinian cuisines. Bukovinian cornmeal, Bukovinian soups, drinks, not necessarily alcoholic drinks, but that too, but local juices that they've all made. Everything is made locally and eco, and you're going to be able to have some of the most unique flavors of foods. And the owners of this restaurant just love it when we bring our guests there, because they want to impress you. And so you better come with an appetite and make room for all this delicious food, because they want you to sample everything, and you're not allowed to leave till that table's empty. Now, of course, when you come to Ukraine, you can get generic international food, but we really like for you to have the opportunity to sample the different local and ethnic cuisines of the different regions. I mentioned earlier that each part of Ukraine is kind of different from one another, and we want to make sure you know the difference between the food that's available to you in Bukovina versus the food that's available to you in Kyiv, as an example. So that's something we really want you to know, that every country we visit has its own unique subregions, and each subregion has its own unique cuisine. Now, one of the special events that happens while you're in Bukovina and Chernivtsi is a folk performance by a group none other than Gerdan, and it is one of our favorite groups, and they have a small theater that we take our guests to, or if we have a big group, then we'll invite them to the hotel to perform in the restaurant. They sing for you a bunch of special Bukovinian songs, and they use the old voice style of singing, which really has a vibration that resonates through the centuries. And for a lot of our guests, it reminds them of the way their grandparents maybe used to sing, and it's a very powerful moment, and we hope you enjoy it. Here's a little bit of a sample. Next, we travel to the Carpathian Mountains of Western Ukraine, a beautiful area, rich in lush landscapes and traditional culture and just fresh air and all kinds of great food. It's going to be an experience that is really calming and relaxing, and everybody always complains after our tours that they wish they could stay longer in the Carpathian Mountains. So here you can see the beautiful landscapes and why people just feel complete sense of relaxation when they travel here. So who lives here in the Carpathian Mountains? A sub-ethnographic group of people called the Hutzels. And the Hutzel people are a really unique group. They have their own sort of dialect, they have their own traditions, they have their own costumes, they have their own music, they have their own food. And when you spend some time with the local Hutzel villagers in their homes, in their schools, in their villages, you get such a sense of warmth and hospitality, and you also feel like, in a way, you've gone back in time. And we are very lucky that we get a chance to very often celebrate traditional Hutzel weddings with the local villagers high in the Carpathian Mountains, where they bring out their horses and they bring out their instruments, and the priest opens the church and we go and have a little celebration, much like most likely our ancestors would have celebrated hundreds of years ago. So it's a real special experience that our travelers have said wonderful things about and can't wait to do it again. So that was a little sample of what our travelers get to experience when they travel with us to the Carpathian Mountains in Ukraine. Next, I want to tell you a little bit about a famous local tradition in the Hutzel area that has recently been recognized as an intangible world cultural heritage and it's the Hutsul ceramics, the Kyiv ceramics. As you can see, they're a very colorful, unique looking special ceramics that are only made in the town of Kyiv, and they have been used as for the ovens, for decoration, for all kinds of different pottery for centuries, and it's been protected now, and it's a very unique item. And you get a chance to, when you visit Kyiv, meet the artisans who are still making this authentic traditional craft in the old way. Then when we go back up into the Carpathian Mountains, as you're driving along the roads, you get to see all these beautiful pieces of architecture. Hutsul church architecture is a unique stamp of its own. And here's a few examples of different churches that you're going to get to see on the road that we travel often from Kyiv to Verkhovina. Along this road, you're going to see such beautiful sights that really just are enchanting to the imagination. Take a look. On the road to Verkhovina, we also stop very often to the town of Yavoril to see how they make lizhniki. Lizhniki are woolen blankets that are made in this village, and everyone in the village, the whole village, is involved in making lizhniki, wool blankets. And what they do is they take the sheep's wool and they dry it and they weave it and they wash it and they color it and they dye it and they do everything. And we get to go into the homes of the local families and see how this process happens. And it's a real special experience. And very often our travelers come home with armfuls of big wool blankets, which is a real treat in the winter. So when you're on a cobblestone tour, whether in Ukraine with us or we go to another country, we're always going to make sure that you visit a local family in a village, in a rural setting, because we really believe that you're going to get a richer experience and a richer flavor of what the country is all about when you see more than just the cities. So here we've experienced the Carpathian Mountains, but no matter where we go, we're going to make sure you get this.
Golden Route!
Welcome to Lviv, the city of lions. Lviv comes from the word Lev, the city of Lev, Lev meaning lion. And there are more lions scattered throughout the city of Lviv than you can even count. And you're gonna really sense the old medieval flavor of the city when you're walking along the cobblestone streets. And the city center, the old city center, is called Ploshcha Rynok, or Market Square. And with the city hall right in the middle, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. And it's protected. And the reason it's so well preserved is because it was never destroyed. And so you've got a rich collection of many centuries worth of architecture, and really it hasn't changed all that much. And it's an undiscovered gem for travelers from anywhere around the world. If you were to compare it to another city, you might say it has similarities to Prague or has similarities to Krakow. But really it has its own spirit and its own flavor. So I really encourage you to come and see Lviv. We really recommend going up to the High Castle, which used to be a castle or a lookout point, and you get a beautiful view of the entire city. And a lot of people like to go up there at sunset or at sunrise and take pictures, and it's a beautiful park up there, and it's a really lovely place to visit. The other thing that makes Lviv special, surprisingly to some people, is the coffee. So there's a legend about Lviv and that's coffee. Apparently, during World War II, when their coffee supplies were cut off, people started digging deep down below underneath the city to find and start mining coffee from ancient reserves. And in Lviv today, you can go to these coffee mines and see how that coffee was collected and created this famous, beautiful coffee tradition in the city of Lviv. The true story we will tell you about when you get here. One of the most spectacular things you can do while in Lviv is to go out and visit the cemetery. I know maybe the idea of visiting a cemetery is not the first thing on your list of, on your bucket list, but this cemetery is more than just a place where people were buried. It is an art gallery. It is an exhibition of history, and it's just got so much beautiful sculptures and tributes to people from Ukrainian history, composers, writers, and people really like to go there as a photographer. It's a great place to visit, just as a tourist to see something unique. Or if you're interested in the history of Ukraine, you're going to find a lot of gems right here in this beautiful cemetery, Kyiv. Another thing that's very worth visiting outside of the city of Lviv is Shevchenkivsky High, which is an open architecture museum and park, and they've collected buildings from all over Western Ukraine and brought them here so you can see the different folk architectures of the different subcultures of the peoples of Western Ukraine. So you can see the Lemko people architecture, the Boyko people, the Hutsal people, some Bukovinian people from Transcarpathia. So you get a whole spectrum of the different rural lifestyles of the people, pre-industrial, and you can see their costumes and their tools, and it's a lovely place to have a picnic and spend the afternoon. Now, there are many churches in the city of Lviv, but one church I'd like to draw your attention to because it's really captured my imagination, and I hope it captures yours, is the Armenian Cathedral. And when you go inside this church, you're unexpectedly awed by the beauty and the calmness inside this place. Besides that, what you're really going to enjoy in Lviv is the food itself. They have started to really explore this concept called Halitska kuchnia, which is Galician cooking or food from Halichina. And Lviv has its own cuisine, which is really a mixture of Ukrainian, Ruthenian, Jewish, Armenian, German, Austrian cooking all together in this unique multicultural setting. And there's been books written about it, and many of the restaurants in Lviv have started to specialize in Halitska kuchnia. So we can take you to some special restaurants, or we can even coordinate for you a master class in your own Galician cooking. And that's something we really like to do on our cobblestone tours, is make sure you have some interactive experiences where you're not just looking at things and smiling and taking pictures, but you actually get your hands in there and have a chance to interact and do something active. So thank you for joining us on this virtual tour of Ukraine. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. It was like a nostalgic trip down memory lane to all the beautiful places that I've visited many times, and I hope to visit them many more times in the future. Please consider putting Ukraine on your bucket list and telling your friends and your neighbors and the world about what an interesting location Ukraine is to visit. So thank you again. Check us out at cobblestonefreeway.ca, and we have all kinds of opportunities for you to visit and engage and explore Ukraine.